Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 7th of January 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, of course, is Mike Robinson. And, well, we've got a pretty crunchy news today. There's a lot happening very quickly as 2016 unfolds. Weather, not too bad in Plymouth. Heavy showers. It's a bit on the chilly side today. Not very good in Salford, we believe, not too good in Norfolk, but Rhyl is enjoying some sunshine, and that's it for our reports today. So we assume you're getting something along those lines: cloudy, overcast, rain, squalls, possibly a bit of snow on high ground. Well, what's really happening in UK? One of our viewers was kind enough to point out some interesting quotes and information that's come from this lady, Naomi Wolf, American author, journalist and former political advisor to Al Gore and Bill Clinton. Now, whilst we might judge her by those former political activities, we're just going to have a look at the quotes that she's made and look at the relevance to what's unfolding not only in America but for us today, what's unfolding in UK. She was apparently born in 1962, Mike, so she's wearing about as well as I am, I think. Let's have a look at this statement. In a fascist system, it's not the lies that count, but the muddying. When citizens can't tell real news from fake, they give up their demands for accountability bit by bit. Remarkable quote. We've been commenting on the fact that, for example, on Syria, it's virtually impossible if you simply look at the so-called mainstream sources to see what's true and what's not. How do people then hold their MPs to account? So we thought there seemed to be some sense in that statement. So we took a look a bit further at this lady and what she's been talking about. And we came across this, The End of America, a letter of warning to a young patriot. And essentially in this, she's putting out 10 steps which mark the path to a fascist state. So let's have a look. Invoke a terrifying internal and external enemy. Create secret prisons where torture takes place, develop a thug caste or paramilitary force not answerable to citizens, set up an internal surveillance system, harass citizens groups, engage in arbitrary detention and release, target key individuals, control the press, treat all political dissidents as traitors, and finally here, suspend the rule of law. So if we go through this and score it on a fairly basic very basic system, I think the results are quite clear. So how are we doing with the terrifying internal and external enemy? Well, we've got ISIS, IS, Daesh, whatever we want to call it. Have we got the prisons? Well, that's been widely reported, and of course, we had David Miliband and Tony Blair, who were involved in the rendition of prisoners to secret overseas locations to be tortured. The thug or paramilitary force, well, we are quite sympathetic to many of Britain's policemen and women, but we have seen the paramilitarisation of Britain's police coming in very quickly, and with it has come what can only be described as thuggish behaviour. We can't even call it policing. Is there an internal surveillance system? Well, around Theresa May, we've said about her spider's web of surveillance over many years, but of course we've now got the top layer of the PREVENT system, and the inset diagram is showing all of the steps that David Cameron has taken to get individuals spied upon and spying on each other. Well, that's a global report for harassing citizens groups. So they felt it was important enough to highlight some of the examples. You can follow that through yourself. Arbitrary detention, well, that must be going on because we've got a parliamentary working group looking at it. Targeting of key individuals, well, what better one to choose than Ian Crane, detained at Exeter Airport simply because he's been speaking out about fracking. Leveson, of course, was trying to control the press. UK Column did extremely good work in helping to expose that. And we've got David Cameron in the last few days clearly saying that if you're not a patriot in his terms, then effectively you're a traitor to your country. And Mike, you've warned over many weeks, months, about the erosion of the Constitution and the fact that we're rapidly heading for suspension of rule of law. What have we got here? Well, this is the route to fascist Britain, and it's happening very, very quickly.
Indeed.
Underlying this, there's something else nasty going on, of course.
Yes, if you're of a weak disposition, please look away now. Because, of course, one of the featured series on the UK Column website is the article series. This is the Common Purpose Effect. So here's a quote from the Common Purpose website by Julia Middleton. Locally and internationally, Common Purpose graduates will be lighting small fires to create change in their organisations and communities. The Common Purpose Effect is best illustrated by the many stories of small changes brought about by leaders who themselves have changed. Now, the Common Purpose Effect series of articles is written by Martin Edwards, who has done some absolutely amazing research and writing to produce this series of articles, and he has just produced the final instalment of the series called Leadership Training for a Common Purpose. I urge everybody to read this and all the other articles and try to get to grips with what this agenda is about. Because, of course, these people setting themselves up above everybody else to make these small incremental changes which are bringing us into this fascist dictatorship that Brian has just been discussing.
And of course, one of the key areas on the common purpose penetration is the NHS. We're getting more and more people talking about absolutely horrific events within the NHS. This is not to decry the good work of many doctors and nurses and care assistants, but what we are seeing is a culture change in the management of the NHS. Where's the root cause? Well, common purpose has got to be well in it. Over the last few months, and particularly over the recent weeks, we have been getting information from police officers deeply concerned with what they understand is going on. And we thought today we'd take you through a summary of information which has been passed to us over very recent weeks. This is quite frightening material when we have a look at it in this form. So we'll start off with this one. The claim is that some 56, this is a rough figure, so it could well be in excess of this, some 56,000 children are now at risk at the highest level of vulnerability and already suffering abuse. These abuse statistics are so dangerous to the government. The central government is effectively blackmailing key child protection charities and organisations by threatening to withdraw public funding if they break ranks and speak out. Now, that is quite a claim, but it's come from somebody who's right at the front end on child protection and policing issues. And this says that there's something very, very dark going on at the top of government. Let's follow on through. Kids Company has been made, quote, an example after warning of wide-scale abuse of children within wealthy and powerful Westminster circles. And it's understood that both David Cameron's name and Oliver Letwin, they come up in the so-called actions against Kids Company. So there's been a lot of material hounding Camilla and Kids Company, Mike. There seems to be something very, very dark and devious going on in the background. The Hampstead child satanic ritual abuse case posed a threat to individuals at the heart of government, and that threat was so great, we are being told it had to be closed down as fast as possible. And that's why there's been the extraordinary haste to get that case through secret courts, no proper police investigation, the children out to fostering, and anybody who's dared raise questions in the public, of course, has been threatened in court themselves. But on it goes. Apparently Hampstead as a community has been calling for private policing to be installed so that the proper needs of the residents are met. That's a very, very interesting statement. If anybody's got more information on that, we'd like to know. All the current police child abuse investigations teams are utterly swamped with new victims coming forward. And of course, that claim fits the statistic of some 56,000 children at least to date. Police officers blowing the whistle on child abuse, and particularly the stalling or pulling of police investigations, are being bullied, fitted up with false accusations, failures at work or low-grade criminal offences, and also accused of being mentally ill. That's a standard procedure, I think. Serving police officers have no idea what the Goddard inquiry is currently doing. Moves are starting in Parliament for a public inquiry into the failure cover-up of police child abuse allegations. That has apparently come to the fore because members of Parliament are saying that the police can't be trusted to investigate themselves. So finally, people beginning to look at the inadequacies of IPCC. And one more to add on the bottom of that, which is this one: the City of London police are literally a law unto themselves. And whereas there's some public and Westminster oversight of the remainder of the police forces, the City of London police are, as it says, law unto themselves. What do you make of that, Mike? This is not light stuff, is it?
No, very serious situation. And very good question is, what is the Goddard inquiry doing?
Well, we don't know, but we think we've got some idea from a recent statement that went up on the website. So let's have a look at Miss Goddard. She's been calling for research bids. This was posted on the 4th of January. And what's this to do with? Well, she wants companies to bid for a research contract which is tasked to look at this. What can be learnt from different jurisdictions outside of England and Wales about the role of institutions in preventing child sexual abuse and exploitation? This to me, and I've labelled it, is looking at solutions before you've even investigated what the real problem is. Or is there something else going on, Mike?
Well, they seem to be making up the terms of reference of this inquiry as they go.
They do.
And surely this, you start looking at other jurisdictions outside of England and Wales. You're looking at other legal systems. You're looking at other systems of institutional arrangement, which aren't necessarily British. And therefore, what we're really looking at here, is it not, is constitutional change.
That's what I think this is. They know where they're going to go on this inquiry, which is close it down, it's the cover-up, and then you're going to bring in named person scheme, possibly. So you haven't investigated the crimes, but you're going to propose, you're already working on what the solutions are. Well, let's follow through what else this lady is claiming. These are all things the inquiry is doing. You have to watch the sickening little video. They're going to expose the past failings of institutions to protect children from sexual abuse. They're going to confront those responsible. That's an interesting word, Mike. What do you think confront means?
Don't know, but the question is how many of those responsible will still be alive by the time this inquiry actually sits.
Indeed, because we're talking 2020 or further on. They're going to provide support for victims and survivors who want to come forward and share their experiences. This is nothing about getting to grips with a vile crime of abuse of children. Just come in, sit down and share your experiences. Have a coffee. And they're going to make meaningful recommendations, not just recommendations, but meaningful ones. We don't know what that means, but presumably when you have a report at this level, the recommendations are going to mean something, but she's emphasising that she's going to produce meaningful recommendations. On it goes. It's going to involve every institution, public and private, and not simply those with direct responsibility for child protection. Now, we're going to get on in a minute to is this inquiry independent? We don't think it is. Of course, NSPCC closely involved with it, so they're not going to be investigating every organisation, are they? Perhaps it's a little bit too complex for me. It's got no time frame, and it may be necessary to go back even decades to uncover abuses of children. So she's got an open book. She can just drag it out, make Chilcot look like an amateur, I would have thought.
Yep.
Number 7 encompasses the present and ongoing failures that might be occurring. Well, we know they're occurring, otherwise there wouldn't be an inquiry. It wants to be forward-looking, and it must make recommendations to protect children. Well, okay, statement of the obvious. And here's three of the key things which he talks about personally. It'll act in a judicial manner without fear or favour. Here's the old lie: if a judge is in charge, you can trust it. Three guiding principles of the inquiry are to be that it's going to be comprehensive, inclusive and thorough. And lastly, it's going to encourage victims to come forward and be heard, and their information will be treated with confidentiality, apart from when they lose it, of course. So
it's the best way to keep things confidential, Brian.
It is. We're going to challenge this lady and the inquiry. Here it says it's a statutory inquiry which is entirely independent of the government. This is simply not true. And if we get back into the text of a letter from this man, John O'Brien, Home Office Director of Safeguarding, in a letter from the 26th of November 2014, this is actually up on the UK Column website. If you search for Goddard, he's talking about relations between the inquiry and the Home Office, the sharing of staff. And here's one lady, Cheryl Mendes. I don't know what her experience in policing is, because she doesn't declare it in her CV, but one of her recent roles has been policy advisor on crime and policing. So she's clearly independent, Mike. Mm-hmm. So if we put that in a simple form, we've got Justice Goddard absolutely surrounded by Home Office staff and NSPCC staff who are working in partnership with the police. This thing is a complete cover-up, Mike. I'm running short of words. We get a hint about what's really been going on in the background, of course.
Yes, because parliamentary fixer Keith Vaz is now demanding information about missing child abuse files. This is 114 files which have apparently been missing, lost or destroyed, linked to allegations of a 1980s paedophile ring in Westminster. Now, the person who's getting the main flack for this is a Home Office civil servant called Mark Sedwill. And he has undertaken apparently to try to provide further details on the 114 potentially relevant files, but has suggested that suggested to the MPs that most of them had probably been destroyed. So he is the Home Office's permanent secretary, and he's ordered an inquiry in order to discover these missing files. And he said, "I'm concerned, frankly, about the 114. I'm concerned about all the material that we cannot find. Most of these files were probably destroyed because the kind of topics they covered would have been subject to the normal destruction procedures that were in place at the time." So what isn't quite clear is whether the outrage that Keith Vaz is expressing is genuine, or whether, in fact, he's been tasked with identifying, is there any possibility that a file with damaging information might be found in the future. So he has been he's really keen to identify where all these files are.
The minimum is this is pretty muddy stuff, isn't it? So I could ask the question, is this just pumped in front of the public to create utter confusion as to what's really going on with this situation?
Well, indeed, and of course we can't really underestimate the sort of involvement of Parliament itself in this. Let's just remember this article from the middle of last year. It was Simon Danczuk making the allegation, but saying that boys in particular were raped and tortured inside Parliament. He was saying children being violated, raped and tortured, some in the very building in which we sit. So, Parliament has a lot of questions to answer, and there just seems to be this incredible reluctance to deal with this issue. I can't imagine why.
Well, I think we can. We'll also add that according to police who are prepared to talk about what's going on, nobody in the police service believes that it was accidental that Lord Janner died when he did. They are highly suspicious of that circumstance. They're also saying that whatever stupid actions Mr. Danczuk has carried out recently, that doesn't detract from the quality of the information which he's originally been bringing forward. So essentially, at least we've got some of the police saying, well, hang on a minute, let's focus on what Simon Danczuk has actually been talking about instead of getting totally distracted with the allegations and circumstances where, at the minimum, he's been pretty foolish. What's it all to do with? Well, we put it together in this form some time ago that the moment we're looking at the abuse of children, we now know we're looking at tens and tens of thousands of children. We know that many of those children are abused in the London area in links which are directly to Westminster. Every direction we go, there's vested interest. These people are not independent, from Cameron to the Home Secretary to Goddard to Sarah Thornton, ex-Thames Valley Police, and the reports that there have been cover-ups by the Metropolitan Police. We've now got officers telling us that's the case. Well, we mentioned the City of London Police. We took a quick look before the start of the programme to see what this police officer might have been talking about. And really, it's in front of you on the website because it says that the police governance, the City of London Corporation is the organisation that supports and promotes the Square Mile. And the police are basically run through their Court of Common Council. So you've got something extraordinary going on here, which is a private police force now becoming a private paramilitary force. And of course, if anybody's got any in-depth questions about paedophilia in the City of London, then they've got another layer to get through, which is the City of London Police. And, well, this is the City of London's own website where you can find your own details about the Court of Common Council. Our whistleblower did tell us something else, and that was that Police Scotland is turning out to be a disaster. That's the single police force for Scotland, and it's such a big disaster that it's forced Westminster to drop the rush for the full integration of English police forces, and they're going to go for regionalisation, and that will include integration with fire service provision.
Yeah, so in the past we have reported that in Devon and Cornwall we now have the pilot combination police officer, fire officer and paramedic, and it looks like this is a model that's going to be rolled out. But in the meantime, Police Scotland, as you say, under extreme pressure, and the new police chief there, the new chief constable there, is declaring his commitment to a unified force. This is Phil Gormley. He says that he admits that there have been reputational issues, according to The Guardian here, since the 2013 amalgamation of all of Scotland's police forces. And he's basically saying that that while it has these significant reputational issues, he doesn't buy into the notion that it's a project that was ill-advised, so he is still promoting it as hard as he can.
Not surprising, and I think David Scott will be talking a little bit more about Police Scotland tomorrow. But we just pulled up one local article which seems to tell us everything is as we think. So here we've got an ITV News report that the local chairman of Devon and Cornwall Police Federation is saying, oh yes, we need to get these southwestern forces merged in order to make cost savings. This is people building their own prison, Mike, isn't it? Really, they have no idea what their little part of the jigsaw is doing. But when you stand back and look at it, you can see it more and more clearly as the day goes past, as the days go past.
Right, completely different subject now. UK Column community website. Forums are one part of it, but another part of it is groups. And Rose Allen here had invited me to join a group called The Truth About UK Social Services. But what I noticed was that she had invited a number of other people to join this group, but their emails bounced back for some reason. Some cases because people's email addresses were incorrect on the UK Column community website, in some cases because their mailboxes were full, and in some cases because the mailboxes didn't exist. So basically this is a call for anybody who wants to take part in some of the organising that's going on via the UK Column website to make sure your contact details are correct so that people can contact you via the website if they want to. And just as a quick update on the podcasting competition, I've started listening to some of those. Brian will be in the next day or so, and we'll aim to make an announcement about the winner on Monday.
Excellent.
Now, financial stuff, because George Osborne is making a speech in Wales this afternoon, and as a precursor to that, he was on Radio 4's Today programme this morning, and this is pretty much what he had to say. He said that 2016 could mark the beginning of the decline for Britain unless we stick to tough economic reforms. And naturally, he blamed China for this. He said that the Bank of England and ministers need to be wary of asset bubbles in the economy and the risks to stability. Well, that's good. And he said, we've got to be ready, we've got to be ready, and when the interest rates go up, that will be a sign of a stronger economy. What a load of nonsense this guy is lying through his teeth. And apparently this afternoon he's going to say that anyone who thinks it's a mission accomplished with the British economy is making a grave mistake. Now, I wasn't clear who that comment was directed to. At first glance, we might think it was to the general public, and we might interpret it one way, therefore, that he's working hard to make the economy better. Or we might look a bit closer and realise that he's not speaking to us at all. He's got a very specific plan for the British economy, and that's to destroy it from a productive point of view. He still has some way to go to turn Britain into a low-wage, low-standard of living nation of coffee servers and shelf stackers, as we've been warning about for months. And this is his long-term economic plan. Now, of course, the financial system is the greatest risk, and it's in a continuing state of collapse. And that's why there's such a drive for war globally. But the markets, of course, taking a bashing at the moment, 3% down today. And who's getting the blame? Well, as we've just mentioned, China, of course, is getting the blame. And that, I think, is strange because China is now the largest recipient of foreign investment in the world. Clearly, we're not being told the truth here. If it's all China's fault, as is Osborne's rhetoric, then it seems strange that investors are flocking there as the only hope for somewhere to put their money. So what's really going on here? Well, we get a clue from Martin Wolf, of course, Arch Bilderberger and chief economics commentator at the Financial Times. And in his article this morning, he is basically saying that we're not going to see any evidence of we're not going to have a complete collapse. He's saying that economic disaster is an unlikely event, and he's giving three main areas of risk, and he's explaining that these are really not important. He's saying that high inflation, well, that can be absolutely managed by the central banks, he says. He's saying that the next risk is financial crisis, and he's saying that the biggest risk of financial crisis is the emerging economies, but that these risks can be contained on a global level, nothing to worry about there. And he's saying that the third major risk is that of geopolitical upheaval and conflict. And again, he lists a whole range of the potential hotspots for that, but he says that, well, if we want to worry, then there's plenty of work to worry about, yet from an economic point of view, it doesn't really matter whether the world is going to be well managed or not. In fact, he states that it won't be well managed. He says that what matters is whether a disaster can be avoided. So it's a bit strange how he ends this off, because what he talks about is the types of disasters that we might face. And the election of a bellicose ignoramus as US president is one thing that he's worried about. A war between Iran and Saudi Arabia would be another disaster, and so on. But he finishes his article by saying the cumulative chance of that at least one of all such disasters will occur is greater than the chance that any one of them will do so. Nevertheless, the likelihood that none of them will occur is surely bigger.
So we did have a little problem with that earlier. Should we read it again?
So I'm going to read that again.
Yeah.
The cumulative chance that at least one of all such disasters will occur is greater than the chance that any one of them will do so. Nevertheless, the likelihood that none of them will occur is surely bigger.
Yeah.
Can you work out what that means?
No, I can't.
So again, I think he's not speaking to us as the general public. That's clearly some kind of common purpose speak that only some people are likely to understand.
Of course, Bilderberg Group there you've got on the slide, Mike, and he's talking about the management of the world. So you see this man sat there. In his mind, he's part of a group of people who've got the mental acumen, the ability to manage the world. When we look out the window, and the reality is that, of course, these people haven't got the ability to manage the local bus service. Unbelievable arrogance, Mike, from people connected with Bilderberg, as just one point to say what's wrong with that organisation.
Absolutely. Now, one of the areas that he did mention, of course, was Saudi and Iran. And Ambrose Evans-Pritchard a couple of days ago talking about this very subject. Saudi showdown with Iran nears danger point for world oil markets. And of course, this is having an effect on oil prices. But, you know, we have an increasingly risky situation with this particular hotspot. We had Saudi Arabia have apparently blown up the Iranian embassy in Yemen today. Perhaps that was an accident, perhaps not. But the point that Evans-Pritchard is making here, he's saying that there is a danger that there be a bloody civil war within Saudi Arabia itself, and that the Saudi monarchy would cease to exist. The cycle of violence, he says, will not spare anyone or anything, including the coveted oil installations. Now, some people might think that that's a good thing, but on the other hand, what would likely replace the Saudi monarchy if that did happen? They're clearly insane because they're dropping cluster bombs on civilian targets in Yemen, and this is it's not surprising that they hit other buildings, including the Iranian embassy in this case. But on the other hand, they need to be reined in. But what would replace them if there was a civil war in Saudi Arabia?
Greater Israel?
ISIS.
Okay, well, let's just have a look at what the Italians have been talking about, which doesn't seem to be spreading too widely, but we've got their foreign minister saying we're still paying after 15 years the consequences of what was supposed to be a lightning war to eliminate the terrorist threat. So it's very interesting that as David Cameron in his 9 Styles anti-terrorism speech says, well, no, terrorism's nothing about our actions in decimating Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or Syria. Nothing to do with that at all. It's all to do with those nasty people that popped up in their university to make remotely controllable car bombs. But here we've got somebody actually looking through the smoke and mirrors. So the truth's out there, but it's not going to be widely reported in the so-called mainstream press. There's hope, I think, Mike. There is hope. People are starting to question this. What can we say to our viewers and listeners? Don't be depressed by the news. It is depressing, but the way to get over that is to get out there, talk to people, swap information, warn other people about what's going on, use simple examples, stick on one small thing at a time. When people are ready, they come to you for the information. And it's the information which is the weapon, information and the truth. As we're seeing senior members of the British government at the moment terrified of the truth about the scale of abuse of children, particularly the abuse of those children in the Westminster circles, that truth coming to the UK and the wider press. So if you're researching child matters, get it out everywhere you can. That's not just on discrete websites, but do try and talk to people in the wider press and media communities. They are becoming receptive to the fact that information is out there. Anything to add on that, Mike? No. Okay, well, we will have David Scott from Northern Exposure with us tomorrow. So that will be an interesting programme. Thank you to everyone who's said to us that they are enjoying the reports from Europe under Eastern Approaches and Alex Thompson. That seems to be going well. I'm sure David Scott will have a good programme for us tomorrow. Thanks very much for joining us. See you at 1 tomorrow, Friday. Thank you. Bye-bye.